Have you ever wondered why some people struggle so much to love themselves? Have you ever stopped to think about what might be behind this inability to look in the mirror and feel good about what you see, to accept yourself, to feel proud of who you are? The answer is not as simple as it seems. In fact, it goes far beyond just low self-esteem or temporary insecurity. It's a deep issue, rooted in life experiences, limiting beliefs, and even social patterns we don't even realize we're following. Today, we're going to dive deep into this topic and discover the real reason why so many people simply can't love themselves. And if you're one of these people, or you know someone going through this, stay until the end, because maybe we can figure out together how to break this cycle and take the first step towards genuine self-love. Where does this difficulty come from? If you think about it, no one is born hating themselves, right? Have you ever seen a baby look in the mirror and think they're not good enough? Everyone is born pure, free from judgment and self-criticism. So, what happens throughout life that causes some people to lose this natural ability to love themselves? One of the most important factors is the environment we grow up in. As children, we are like sponges, absorbing everything around us, and that includes the messages we receive from our parents, friends, school, and society as a whole. If a child grows up hearing that they're not good enough, that they need to try harder, that they shouldn't fail, they will internalize those messages. Over time, this turns into an inner critical voice that, instead of encouraging, only brings them down. Now, think about a child who constantly receives criticism, even subtle ones. What do they learn? That love and acceptance are given conditionally. That they will only be loved if they are perfect, if they please others. This creates a deeply ingrained belief that they, as they are not worthy of love. This belief is carried into adulthood, where it manifests as difficulty accepting their own flaws, a constant need for external validation, and, of course, the inability to love themselves. The influence of emotional trauma. Beyond the environment we grow up in, the traumas we face throughout life can also impact our ability to love ourselves. Trauma leaves deep marks, and often those marks come with guilt, shame, and even the feeling that, somehow, we deserved what happened. It's as if the trauma proves that we're not good enough, that something about us is wrong. Imagine, for example, someone who has been a victim of emotional, physical, or psychological abuse. These experiences not only cause immediate pain but also plant seeds of doubt and self-deprecation that grow over time. The person might start believing the problem lies within them, that they are not deserving of love and respect. This creates a vicious cycle. The more they feel unworthy, the harder it is to love themselves. And the less they love themselves, the more vulnerable they become to new traumas and repeating self-destructive patterns. And here's a very important point. Trauma doesn't need to be something huge, something big in the eyes of others. Often, small rejections or repeated humiliations can be just as devastating as a major loss or abuse. The human brain doesn't measure trauma by size but by emotional intensity. And it's precisely this intensity that, when unresolved, prevents a person from developing self-love. Society and its unattainable standards. Now, let's talk about another big villain in this story, society. It plays a huge role in shaping how we see ourselves. From a young age, we are bombarded with images and messages about what it means to be good enough. You have to be beautiful, thin, successful, happy all the time. If you don't fit that standard, society makes sure to remind you that something is wrong with you. And this is reinforced from all sides, on social media, in magazines, on TV. The comparison is constant and, often, cruel. Think about it. Today, with social media, we are exposed to an edited and perfect version of other people's lives. And what happens? We start to compare ourselves. We begin to think that we are not good enough because we don't have the body of that model, the car of that entrepreneur, the perfect life of that couple. And do you know what the biggest problem is? We're comparing ourselves to an unreal version of things. Most people only show the good side of life online, creating an absurd pressure for us to reach an ideal of perfection that simply doesn't exist. This cycle of constant comparison undermines our self-love. Because, deep down, every time we compare ourselves, we end up feeling inferior. And this feeling of inferiority is one of the greatest enemies of self-love. How can you love yourself when you're always thinking you need to be someone else to be accepted? The inner voice, the greatest enemy of all. And now, let's talk about something that probably everyone here has experienced: the inner voice. You know, that critical little voice that shows up at the worst moments? The one that says you're not good enough, that you'll never make it, that something is wrong with you. Yeah, that voice is one of the biggest obstacles to self-love. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. As we mentioned earlier, it's built over the years, based on the experiences we live through and the messages we absorb. But the problem is that, over time, this voice becomes so present that we start to believe it's the truth. It's like a broken record repeating the same criticisms endlessly until we begin to accept it as fact. Now, think with me. If you spent the entire day listening to someone criticize you, saying you're not good enough, that you'll never succeed, how would you feel? Tired, unmotivated, sad, right? So, why would it be any different when that criticism comes from within? The impact is the same, or even worse, because it's you saying it to yourself. The false idea that self-love is selfishness. Many people also have difficulty loving themselves because of a mistaken idea society teaches us: that loving yourself is being selfish. Who hasn't heard phrases like, "Don't think about yourself so much," or "Don't be so vain"? This makes us associate self-love with arrogance, vanity, or egocentrism. And, of course, no one wants to be seen that way, right? But the truth is that self-love has nothing to do with that. In reality, loving yourself is the foundation for us to be able to love others genuinely. When you love yourself, you don't need to seek validation all the time. You feel complete, and that allows you to give love without expecting anything in return. Self-love is, in fact, the opposite of selfishness. But this confusion of concepts makes many people feel guilty for putting themselves first. And this guilt ends up creating a barrier that prevents the person from cultivating love for themselves. Overcoming the lack of self-love. Now that we understand where this difficulty comes from, the question is, what can we do to overcome it? The first step is to recognize that self-love is not something that simply happens. It's a process, a daily construction. And, like any other skill, it can be developed with practice and patience. This means, for example, learning to silence the inner critical voice, changing the way you see yourself, and treating yourself with more compassion. One of the most powerful techniques for this is the practice of self-acceptance. Instead of trying to be perfect or please everyone, you start accepting who you are, with all your flaws and qualities. Acceptance is the path to self-love, because when you accept yourself, you stop fighting against yourself. If you're committed to your personal development and want to keep evolving and leveling up, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, I always bring practical and powerful content to help you keep growing. And if this video helped you in any way, make sure to leave a like so that more people can be impacted as well. In the description, you'll find links to books that I've carefully selected, works that can completely transform the way you think and act. It's definitely worth checking out. And don't leave just yet. Take a look at the suggested videos here on the screen. They will help you even more on your personal development journey. See you there.